between these countries and give you a sense of what are the sort of positives or some of the challenges associated with these destinations. So what we will talk about is US, UK, Canada, Australia, Singapore, Ireland and Germany, and we will compare the program, the duration, the standardized test required, the average cost and the educational requirement to get it. And we focus on, while the slide has information for both undergrad and for masters, given that all of you are potentially looking at masters, we only talk about masters during this presentation. So if you look at programs and duration, right? So when it comes to masters, most countries have the program duration for a master's program is 1 to 2 years, right? So US has 1 to 2 years, Canada has 1 to 2 years, Australia has 1 to 2 years, Singapore has 1 to 2 years, Ireland is 1 to 2 years, Germany is usually 2 years. UK is the only country which is significantly different, where majority of the programs, master's programs, tend to be 1-year programs. Right? If you look at the US and Canada, majority of the programs tend to be 2-year programs, but you will find a few programs that are either 1 year or 3 semester or 1.5 year programs. So as the standardized test required, so there are two kinds of standardized tests. Right? One is an academic aptitude test, your GRE or GMAT, and then there is the English language test, which is your TOEFL or IELTS. Irrespective of the country, you're going to need an English language test, a TOEFL or an IELTS. There might be some exceptions in a place like UK where the medium of instruction letter or your scores during your 12 standard might give you a waiver from the English language test requirement. But in general, the English language test is going to be required. As far as an academic aptitude test is concerned, a GRE is usually required in the US and usually not required in any other country. Right? So while there are plenty of universities in the US which waive off the GRE requirement or make GRE optional, typically there are a lot of universities which will still require the GRE. Most other countries, except for few exceptions here and there, will not require a GRE for admission to a master's program. The only main exception is if you are applying to a top 100 MBA program, then typically, irrespective of the country, typically a GMAT will be required. Average cost. Now these obviously vary a lot depending on the university. Even in a place like the US, you will have universities where the average cost is, let's say, $20,000 for the entire program at the lower end of the spectrum, and there might be universities where the cost is about $110,000 for the entire program. That's the tuition fee. So it varies a lot. So what we've tried to do here is just to give you a rough benchmark of what costs you can expect, and more than anything else, you'll be able to do a quick comparison between what is the cost in a particular country relative to some other country. Right? So US in general tends to be a little more expensive compared to other countries. The cost ranges from about 15 to 45 lakhs as far as tuition is concerned. Living more or less remains the same with minor differences across countries, but tuition fee is where the major differences are. So US is 15 to 45 lakhs. UK is 15 to 35 lakhs, but UK overall will work out cheaper generally because it's a 1-year program compared to a 2-year program in most other countries. Canada tends to be cheaper in general compared to the US and UK, 12 to 30 lakhs. Australia tends to be more on the expensive side, both as far as tuition fees are concerned and also living expenses are concerned. And also Australia is more or less comparable to the US, maybe slightly 10% cheaper. Singapore, again, relatively more expensive. Ireland is probably closer to where UK is at. Germany is the major exception, right? So Germany, typically you have public universities and private universities. When it comes to public universities in Germany, education is state-sponsored, right? So irrespective of whether you are a local student or an international student, you don't pay any tuition fees in public universities in Germany, except for some small semester fee or administration fee, etc., which is payable in each semester. When it comes to private university cost-wise are pretty similar to what you would find in other parts of continental Europe. Another major difference is in terms of the education requirement, right? So places like the US, UK, Germany have a requirement that you need to have a 4-year bachelor's degree to be able to get into a master's program. Most other countries like UK, Australia, Singapore, Ireland, etc., a 3-year master's degree would be sufficient to meet the entry requirement for a master's program. So that's another difference between the two countries, or the difference between the Just to sort of finish this discussion in terms of country comparison, what we are going to do here is look at what the payback options are in each of these countries after you complete your education, and then just sort of summarize by talking about the pros and cons. So in the US, again, I think many of you might be aware, but programs are sort of differentiated into STEM and non-STEM. Right? So STEM is anything related to science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and non-STEM is anything else. So if you're doing the STEM program, you get what is known as a 3-year OPT. OPT is optional practical training, which means you are able to work in the US for a period of 3 years after you complete your master's degree. Right? And that's part of your student visa itself. So you don't need any kind of a work visa. If you're doing a non-STEM program, MBA could be an example of a non-STEM program. The OPT period is usually only 1 year. UK, irrespective of what you study, as long as you do a master's degree, you get a 2-year post-study stay back. Canada, this has actually changed a little bit, right? So in Canada, till recently, the duration of your stay back depended on the duration of your program. So if you did a 1-year master's degree, you could only stay back for 1 year. Whereas if you did a 2-year master's degree, you could stay back for 3 years. But this has recently changed, just last month, where if you are doing a master's degree, irrespective of the duration of your master's degree, doesn't matter whether it's a 1-year degree, 1.5-year degree, or a 2-year degree, you will get a 3-year stay back in Canada. Right? So that's something that has changed in the last month. Australia, your stay back actually depends on the city in which you study. So if it's a top-tier city like Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane, you get a 2-year stay back. Smaller cities or other regional capitals like Perth, Adelaide, etc., you get a 3-year stay back. And regional cities, right, which is really small towns and almost sort of rural areas, if you study in some of those, you get a 4-year stay back in Australia. Singapore, you actually don't get a work permit along with your student visa. What you get is a 1-year visit pass where you can stay in Singapore for that period of time and then get a job, and then if you get a job, your employer will sponsor you for a work visa. Germany, you get an 18-month residence permit, which means after completion of your master's degree, you can stay in Germany for 18 months. For those 18 months, you can work or do any kind of job that is available in Germany. And once you get a job which is in line with what you have studied, you can apply for the German residence permit. Ireland, very similar to the UK. So if you're doing a master's program, you get a 2-year stay back after completion of your program. Just to summarize the advantages and disadvantages, so if you look at the US, studying STEM in the US is a really good option for a couple of reasons. One is you get a 3-year OPT, so you can stay back and work for longer. But more importantly, most of the STEM-related research, irrespective of what field it is, whether it is sort of engineering or technology or any other sort of upcoming areas like data science, etc., the most cutting-edge research across the world happens in US universities. If you're studying in one of those top universities there, you will have access or exposure to some of the absolute cutting-edge research in the field that you plan to study, which again makes US a really good option to study programs. Also, US is perhaps the easiest country or easiest destination to get student loans from, and we will talk a little bit about student loans when we sort of come to the next slide. Disadvantages, relatively expensive, like we discussed, compared to many other countries. Green card, PR, or sort of long-term work visas, long-term permanent settlement, etc. Is quite difficult in the US and can sometimes take more than 10-15 years when it comes to PR. Not a great option for non-STEM as we've discussed. UK, again, really good universities, cost-wise relatively affordable because of 1-year programs, but not a great option for STEM because there isn't a lot of STEM research happening at the university level in the UK. There are exceptions, of course. Canada, in general, friendly state and immigration policies. However, few things have changed in the last 3 or 4 months because of issues between India and Canada and some of the changes with the student visa scheme that Canada has implemented. So maybe the shine has sort of reduced a little bit when it comes to Canada, but it still continues to be a really good destination, especially if you are considering the top 5 or 10 universities like the UBC, Toronto, McGill, etc. Absolutely world-class universities. But once you go lower down in terms of university rankings, are very competitive to get in, primarily because there is a huge demand. But traditionally, over the last 5 years, there has been huge demand in terms of the number of students applying, and the number of good universities are relatively typically hard to get into a good computer science program or a business analytics program with a GPA of less than 8.5 in the top 5 universities in Canada. For the lower ranked universities, typically there is generally a visa rejection problem in Canada. As you go lower down, between 30-40% of the student visas get rejected without Canada. Australia, good study abroad, good sort of post-study stay-back options, and again, like Canada, has pretty good universities when you're looking at the top 5 or 7 universities, but relatively expensive, and also long-term stay-back is becoming difficult. Singapore, I mean, for careers such as finance, hospitality, IT, a good option, may not be such a great option for sort of core engineering, again, relatively expensive. Germany, again, for core engineering subjects, probably one of the best options along with the US. So if you're looking at studying electrical, electronics, mechanical, any core engineering subjects, German universities have real advantage when it comes to the quality of education. Also, cost-wise, Germany can be a really good option because in public universities, tuition is fully state-funded. As far as disadvantages, language can be a major barrier. Now, language is something which is interesting when it comes to Germany. Most of your programs are going to be in English, right? So, programs are English taught, which is why students generally underestimate the importance of language when it comes to studying in Germany because the program is in English. But where the challenge starts is at the end of the program, when it comes to getting a job and being able to sort of become successful in your job long term in Germany, that is extremely difficult unless you know German. So it's always a good idea to study German to a reasonable level even before going to Germany. While from an admissions perspective, that is not really a requirement for English language or English taught programs. Ireland, again, small country but has benefited a lot because of Brexit. What happened is when UK went out of the European Union, many of the businesses, especially the technology businesses, which had their European headquarters in UK or London, shifted to Ireland because Ireland is still part of the European Union. So for certain kinds of roles, for example, Google, Amazon, etc., have all their sort of regional or European headquarters now in Ireland. So for roles such as data analytics, business analytics, data science, etc., Ireland continues to be a really good option. But beyond that, I think it's a relatively small economy, so it doesn't have too many advantages compared to something like the UK. Alright, so that's a quick comparison of the different countries, and we'll sort of come back during the Q&A if you have any specific questions on any of these countries or anything else related to or any other country, for example, that you might have in mind. What I wanted to quickly do, right? I mean, student loans is actually a topic by itself for a full discussion. But what I wanted to do is give you a quick overview of the different student loan options that are available and what the general eligibility requirements for each of those options are. Right? So typically, student loans fall within two categories, right? So these two would fall under student loans given by lenders outside of India, and these two fall under student loans given by lenders in India. Right? So we'll talk about these first, and then we'll go to the ones where the lenders are outside of India. When it comes to Indian lenders, there are two kinds of loans essentially. One is a secured loan, where you give some kind of an asset like a property or something which is mortgaged to the bank, against which the loan is given. And second is an unsecured loan, where you don't need to do that, and the loan is given without the mortgage of a property. Right? So that's this one, rupee loan, Indian rupee loan without collateral. Typically, this is only available for master's programs, right? So for bachelor's programs, you don't get student loans without collateral. So master's programs in many of the countries you're able to get. These are generally given by Indian NBFCs and non-banking financial companies and private banks. Right? Typically, public sector banks will not give loans without collateral. The maximum amount usually is for the US around 50 lakhs. So depending on certain cases or for certain top universities, the banks might go up to 60 lakhs for the US. And for other countries, including UK, Canada, Australia, etc., usually the upper limit is 25 lakhs, which again might stretch to up to 30 lakhs depending on the university, etc. as we discussed, collateral is not required. However, you will need your parent, typically your parent, to be a co-borrower. But there are certain exceptions where you could have a sibling or some other blood relative as your co-borrower. But most commonly it is the parent. Moratorium. So moratorium is basically when you start making your repayments. You get a loan, you study, and then at some point of time you start making a repayment. Usually for a unsecured loan, a full moratorium, meaning you don't pay anything till you complete your education, is not available. You either have to pay a fixed partial interest, which would be say 5,000 rupees a month or 7,000 rupees a month every month while you are studying, or in some cases the bank require you to pay the simple interest every month when you complete your education, and then your EMI start up on completing your education. Usually the loan term is about 10 years. Interest rates for this option typically start at about 11%. I mean, what we are seeing right now in the market, 11 to 12% for the US, and UK and other countries tend to be 12%. The rupee loans with collateral, the main difference is here you will need some property to be given as collateral to the bank. However, you can take a much higher amount, typically 1.5 CR, you can even up to 2 CR. So that's not the other big difference is moratorium is available, which means till 6 months after completion of the program, you are not required to make any repayments back to the bank. So no partial interest, no simple interest. The complete waiver from any kind of payments till 6 months have passed after the completion of the program. That's the main difference. Again, interest rates, because it's a secured loan, will typically be lower. Currently, they start at about 9.5%. Also, another sort of interesting thing when it comes to collateral-based loan, if you're taking a loan from a public sector bank, because of a central government policy, girl students get a 0.5% reduction in interest rate. So typically, if the interest rate is 9.5%, girls would get a loan at an interest rate of 9%. So these sort of other Indian rupee loan options. Now, if you look at the US dollar loan options, right? Now, in general, for the US dollar loan options, there is no concept of collateral, right? So for either of these options, you're not going to require collateral. What is different between these two options is whether you need a co-signer or a co-borrower, or you don't need opt-in. So this is where you need a co-signer, this is when you don't need a co-signer. Now, when it comes to a loan from a US bank, and where a co-signer is required, the requirement is that the co-signer has to be someone in the US who is a green card holder or a citizen, right? US citizen or a green card holder, right? So some people tend to have someone, many others don't tend to have someone, but in case someone has that, this is a really good option because interest rates are significantly lower here compared to any other option, right? So right now interest rates are starting at 5.75% compared to 10 or 11% in most other ones, right? So you end up saving a lot of money when you on interest when you prepay the this interest rate of 4.75 is what it is right now, but this larger interest rates in the US have risen significantly over the last couple of years. But we have done loans at less than 1.5% also, right? So it is almost like interest-free loans or close to that. So that this is a really good option for someone who has relatives or close friends, family friends, etc. in the US, and you can end up saving a lot of money. The other option is US dollar loan without collateral. This is typically given by institutions like, you've probably heard some of these names, Prodigy, Empower, etc., where loans are given without co-signer or without any kind of collateral. They have a select list of universities, typically most of the top 100, 120 universities in the US are covered, and they give a loan of up to $100,000. You don't need any co-signer, you don't need any collateral, and typically you get loans up to 10 years. Interest rates start at 10-11%, but there is a fair variety rate. So for some universities, you might end up getting an interest rate at maybe 11%, 11.5%. But for some lower ranked universities, the interest rates could be as high as 14-15%. Right? So their rate would be quite varied. That's a quick summary on student loan options. Now I just want to take a few minutes to talk about us, about Enrisen, and then we'll do a quick Q&A to discuss any of the questions that you might have. Right? So I'm assuming that, this is probably not the first study abroad related conversation or seminar that you attended or been part of it, probably been a few others. There are some large counselors like your IDP, there's College Point, which is not far from here. And what is really different about us is we are a boutique study abroad counseling company, which means a couple of things. One is there is a lot more personalized attention to every student who is taking their counseling from us. We're not like an IDP where you are one amongst 1,000 other students that they are working with in that particular year, sometimes more than 1,000. And what that also means is you are able to speak to and get comfortable with your counselor before you sign up. Right? So you know whom you're going to work with as a counselor before you sort of commit to working with us as an organization. And I think that's a big thing because in most cases with most other counselors, you don't know who your counselor is going to be and how good your counselor is going to be till you've actually signed up with that. Right? So you're basically signing up based on the name of the company rather than having any kind of comfort level with the counselor. So I think that's something that is very different when it comes to us. Integrated services, again, a lot of people do offer this, but I think we take a very holistic approach to the entire process, right? So typically when you go to a counselor, a student loan is not something that they would think about at the time of deciding which university you apply to, right? But that's not always the best option because sometimes based on a student's profile, there are certain sort of restrictions in terms of what kind of student loans you can take. And when you have those restrictions, that also sort of should in one way guide the kind of universities that you are applying to. Just as an example, right? So in case there is someone who has no cosigner and no collateral, right? So if you look at all of these options, this is really the only student loan that is possible for someone who has no cosigner and no collateral. And this is an important data point that needs to go into selecting your university because there's no point in applying to universities where to get a loan you are going to require either cosigner or collateral. So if that is not available, I mean, it's pointless applying to that university because how are you going to fund your education for that university? Right? Also, we are country agnostic, right? So we spoke about 5, 6, 7 different countries that we, or sort of the major countries, but we work with students going to places like Japan. We work with students going to places like South Korea. We've worked with one student going to South America, and then currently we're working with a student who is looking at studying in Mauritius or places. University agnostic, again very important. So typically there are some counselors who only work with a set of partner universities which may commission, so that IDP is a good example, and they're very open about it as well. We're not focused on a particular set of universities that they commission. Our goal is to figure out for a particular student, for a particular profile, given his or her goals, what are the best possible universities and how do we work with you or how do we help you get into a university that is going to be the best outcome for you. So that's another difference when it comes to what we do. And we've had a lot of students go to some of the top universities in UG. In fact, last year I think we had about 6 or 7 students from Sanghavi. I don't remember if there's someone from the electronics this thing or not, but definitely students from the computer science department, etc. And we've had Sanghavi students go to Carnegie Mellon and University of Toronto, right? So now some of the top universities. Student loans, I sort of gave you an example of how it's important to integrate student loans or your eligibility for student loans as part of your overall admissions sort of strategy or admissions process. So with that, I want to sort of end the presentation so that we have a little bit of time to talk about any questions that you might have. And I also wanted to put this slide up where you have all our contact details, etc. in case you want to take a photo, so that in case you feel like connecting with us, either for your admissions counseling or for student loan related stuff, or just for a doubt that you might want to clarify, feel free to do that. So any questions, either related to what we discussed or anything else related to study abroad? Okay, can we actually start with the 2 questions that initially came up? Right, so you had a question. Do you want to just repeat that for my benefit? खंड देखो ऐसा है कि there are lots of countries, right, and lots of destinations. Even in a place like the US, the north, the further north you go, the colder it is going to be. Right? So go to a place like Chicago, go to a place like New York, go to a place like Seattle. These are really, really cold places. The further south you go, the climate becomes much nicer. So to an extent where you might feel so hot that it's probably not that hot as the name of it. Right? So if you go to a place in Florida, for example, Texas, etc., the climate is right. So again, typically at your ages, adjusting to temperatures is not that difficult. Right? So unless you are so sensitive to it, I would not recommend choosing your destination or university based on the climate. Because literally within a couple of weeks you'll get adjusted to the temperature. Right? Also, you had another question. Okay, one, there is no advantage. Typically, most of these Telugu speaking, these are not Telugu speaking universities, but these are universities which are more popular in places like Hyderabad or Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and these are usually the commission-paying universities. Is there any advantage? I mean, generally these tend to be the lower cost universities, so that is an advantage. Is there any disadvantage? Yes, many of these universities have very high visa restrictions, right? So you should be careful. Not all of them, but in general, you should be careful when you are looking at universities that are more focused on Telugu. Various, right? There are some which have good academics, some which have not so good academics. Right? You had a question. Okay, how do you select the university? I think what's more important to understand is how not to select universities. Right? So selecting universities only based on ranking, probably not a good idea, right? Because ranking is generally university specific or department specific, may not necessarily reflect what you want to study. What I generally look at is 4 or 5 things, right? One, for me the program and the curriculum and how that fits in with what areas of interest you have, especially at the graduate level, is probably your most important factor that you should look at. Does the curriculum, does the program fit in with what my areas of interest are, both from the perspective of master's program and potentially if I do want to do a PhD later on, are there options available in that university where that possibility might exist if I choose to do that? That's extremely important. I think the second most important thing, apart from your rankings and all of those things, is the cost. Right? And especially in a place like the US, you have public universities which typically tend to be relatively low cost and private universities which tend to be more expensive. If you ask me, I really do not think there is any benefit in going to some of those very expensive private universities where the cost of a master's program is 100,000, 110,000, 120,000. There might be a few examples. Right? I mean, a good example is if someone wants to study computer science, going to a Carnegie Mellon would still be a great idea even if it's a very expensive private university. But going to something like a University of Boston or going to something like a University of Southern California, which tends to be very popular among Indian students, I don't think is a great idea because of the cost involved and the return of investment. So that's important. Also, the other thing that you should also look at is how do you sort of match your profile to what the university is. So let's say you have a particular GPA and a particular GRE score. In general, one of those will tend to be stronger than the other. Right? Some people have a higher GRE score, some people have a higher GPA. There are some universities in the US which are a lot more GRE focused, and then there are some universities which are a lot more GPA. So if your strong suit is your GPA, you're better off focusing on universities which are more focused on these are some of the things that you should not look at. Climate doesn't really matter, I think. But there might be someone who is very sensitive to climate, right? So for that individual, yes, that might be an important factor, but in general, location is something which is important, but I still don't think it is as important as the university, the curriculum, etc. Obviously, you have better roles. So when it comes to part-time work, right? In general, you're only allowed to work on campus, right? So it doesn't really matter what location you are in because you're not allowed to work outside of campus in the US. But when it comes to things like internship, etc., obviously the city that you are in or the location you are in will have an impact because you typically end up finding an internship within a Okay, any other questions? Yeah. Okay, so when you say market, I'm trying to understand your question. Your question is, given the economic situation right now in most countries, like maybe US, UK, etc., where economically things are not that great at this point of time, is it a good time to go now, or does it make more sense to go, let's say, next year or the year after? Right? So I think there could be a variety of different sort of answers to this question, but the way I look at it is, in general, right, the best time to study is when economically things are not great, right? For this reason, you look at any sort of economic recession or economic bad time that we have had in the last 50, 60, 70 years, at no point of time has it lasted for more than 1 or 2 years, right? Assuming the same thing continues, and there is really no reason to believe that this is going to be longer than what we have had in the last 50, 70 years. If you study now, you will actually be graduating at a time when the economy is on a complete rebound. Right? And that would be the best time to get out of college, get out of university, and find jobs, because that's when the demand is going to be really, really strong. Right? So from that perspective, I think it makes sense to study when economically things are not that great. And there is data to back this up as well. I mean, if you look at most top B schools, like Harvard, Wharton, Kellogg's, etc., generally when the economy is not doing great, the number of applications that they get actually increases significantly, right? Because typically that's when people find it most convenient to take a break from their career and go back to study, because the economy is not doing great, and by the time they graduate, the economy is sort of turned around. Okay, yeah. So, when it comes to how universities evaluate applications, bear in mind that your grades and marks and test scores are still going to be very, very, very important, right? It is a misnomer to think that my grades will not matter, and just because I have a really good sort of profile in terms of extracurriculars, etc., I will get into a top. Right? So all that and done, grades are important. So make sure that you focus on your grades, right? So sort of don't let that get ignored because of focus on working on the rest of your program. Right? Because I have not heard of any student with a GPA of 7 get into a top 10, top 15, top 20. It just does not happen. Right? So you might, there might be some exception of someone who has some huge patent or something like that, for whom just because of that, that person is an outlier and the university might still want him or her. But in general, for 95% of the students applying to universities, it does not happen. Right? So grades, marks are important. Beyond that, there are a few things that you should do. Right? And I would sort of classify them into technical things and sort of non-technical. So when it comes to technical, internships or work experience matter. So I think that really does. Any kind of, I don't want to use the word publication because it really does not matter whether it gets published or not, but any kind of research experience or any kind of papers that you worked on or any kind of projects that you worked on matter. Right? Again, look at it this way. All of these things that I've seen, right? The publication, papers, internships, etc. If you poll the class, almost everyone has done these kind of things. So, whether you've done it or you've almost everyone's done. What matters is how what you have done is different compared to what everyone else has done, and how that makes you stand out compared to everyone else. So when it comes to the university, think about it when admissions officers they get 400 applications, all those 400 people have done an important thing. All those 400 people have done something. So they're not going to make a choice based on